So she saw Keir Starmer and his silly government, a new one, and it was brilliant to see. She's also asked two-tier Keir to admit he had been wrong and to apologise to Rosie Duffield for the appalling way she was treated by the party. She even stood up in PMQs and told him straight out that his party had bent the knee to every passing fad. You remember that picture of Keir Starmer taking the knee in 10 Downing Street? It made me fucking sick to my stomach. And he's never had the balls to stick up for women. What did he do in response? He didn't answer any one of her questions at question time. No, he didn't apologise. He squirmed his way out of it. But I'd like to be able to help the honourable lady. But in her party, we've got that self-licking ice cream, Robert Jedrick, who's plotting behind her back to make a pact with reform. Wow. Has Robert Jedrick got a point? Should the Conservative... Ooh, sandwich vans here. Should Robert Jedrick carry on with this feeling that a pact with reform is the way to go? I think it is. And Word Round the Campfire thinks it is as well. But the Prime Minister, that's what he leapt on that, didn't he? He could not answer. He made himself an absolute pathetic tosser because he knows he's been caught bang to rights, being useless. Well, that's unforgivable, Prime Minister. No one's forgotten what you and your party really thought about women when it was far more trendy to take the trans and terrifying that the UK leader, right, had to be told by a court what a woman is.
Keir Starmer's recent handling of questions around women's rights has reignited serious concerns about the Labour leader's credibility, not only as a political figurehead, but as someone capable of principled leadership. In a political climate already rife with confusion over gender policy, Starmer's refusal to give direct answers, offer apologies, or take accountability for Labour's past stance marks a low point for a party, once seen as a bastion of progressive clarity. During a recent public appearance, Starmer sidestepped pointed questions about women's rights, particularly regarding biological sex, safe spaces, and the erosion of clarity around what it means to be a woman. It's an issue that has divided the left, frustrated female voters, and undermined Labour's core support. His evasiveness was palpable, an awkward dance around language that used to be rooted in common sense and now collapses under the weight of political caution. This is not merely about semantics. It's about safety, policy, and trust. For months, critics, including women's rights campaigners from across the political spectrum, have called for the Labour Party to clarify its position on gender identity legislation, single-sex spaces, and the legal implications of self-identification. Instead, the response from the party under Starmer has been one of calculated ambiguity and deference to the loudest activist voices. When pressed, Starmer avoided issuing any form of apology for the party's previously muddled position. Even as journalists asked for clarity and female constituents demanded recognition, the Labour leader offered none. What emerged instead was a picture of a party more concerned with chasing political trends than offering leadership. This lack of forthrightness stands in stark contrast to Labour's own historical identity. For decades, it was the party that championed equal pay, anti-discrimination laws, and legislative victories for women. Yet now, in an era where defining a woman is considered controversial in certain circles, Labour appears afraid to defend the very demographic that carried much of its moral authority for generations. Critics argue this reluctance stems from a broader crisis of authenticity within the party. Rather than lead on issues of principle, Labour under Starmer often seems to follow, reacting to cultural winds rather than setting its own course. In doing so, it alienates traditional supporters who feel their concerns are being dismissed in favor of appeasing fringe ideological elements. The problem is compounded by Starmer's own technocratic image, a man who prides himself on detail and discipline, yet shrinks from confrontation when moral clarity is needed most. The Prime Minister should be capable of holding two thoughts in his head: protecting trans rights and safeguarding women's rights. Instead, we get a hesitancy that pleases no one and damages trust on all sides. Ultimately, Starmer's inability to address women's issues directly has exposed more than political discomfort. It has revealed a deeper fear within Labour, a fear of confronting the ideological contradictions that now sit at the heart of its progressive identity. As the next election looms, the cost of this fear may be profound. For many women, and voters who care about coherent, consistent leadership, the silence is louder than any statement. And in politics, when you refuse to speak with conviction, the electorate eventually answers for you.
And can I start by asking you about these comments from Tony Blair this morning about net zero? He says net zero is doomed to fail. He says a radical reset is irrational. And he doesn't want people to make financial sacrifices or changes in lifestyle in order to achieve net zero. Do you agree with those comments?
Well, yes, and indeed Kemi Badenoch dared to say this some 2 months ago now in her speech. She was, she got a lot of criticism at the time, particularly from the left, but we have said now we want to look at this policy. Of course, we all want to see a cleaner world. We want to preserve and protect our countryside for future generations, but we have to do so in a way that is A, possible and B, affordable. And what we're very worried about is that the current government's obsession with net zero and setting impossible targets such as 2030, these are simply impossible. And what is more, it risks the wider environmental agenda that we all care about. We care about our trees, our countryside and our water and air quality. But this really threatens the public's support for those efforts. And so, it's great that Tony Blair now agrees with Kemi Badenoch. Let's hope that his protege Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband are listening, because it is their policies that are doing so much damage to the economy and indeed making life far more expensive for bill payers when it comes to our energy bills.
In a political twist few anticipated, former Prime Minister Tony Blair has publicly thrown his weight behind a radical reset of Sir Keir Starmer's environmental policies, a move that has given unexpected momentum to conservative criticisms of Labour's climate strategy and exposed simmering tensions within the opposition's top ranks. Speaking in response to Blair's intervention, Shadow Environment Secretary Victoria Atkins, MP, delivered a pointed message. It's great that Tony Blair agrees with Kemi Badenoch. Let's hope that his protege Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband are listening. Her comment, though cloaked in diplomacy, carried the unmistakable sting of political theater, highlighting a growing perception that Labour's green ambitions are out of sync, not only with economic realities, but with the Labour Party's own internal factions. The former Labour leader's call for a radical reset comes at a time when Sir Keir Starmer has struggled to strike a balance between ambitious net zero targets and fiscal pragmatism. His Pace 28 billion a year green prosperity plan, originally the centerpiece of Labour's economic revival narrative, has already undergone delays, revisions and soft-polling in response to economic headwinds and voter anxiety. Blair's critique was sharp. Without a realistic implementation framework, he argued, Labour risks setting lofty goals that ultimately become liabilities. His intervention adds intellectual firepower to those urging a rethink and puts pressure directly on Starmer and Ed Miliband, the party's de facto architect of green policy. For the Conservatives, it's an open goal. Victoria Atkins' comments align Blair's remarks with existing Tory criticisms that Labour's Green Plan is financially reckless, ideologically rigid, and potentially damaging to British industry at a time when energy security and economic resilience are top voter concerns. Ed Miliband, a longtime climate advocate and current driving force behind Labour's net zero framework, now finds himself in an increasingly precarious position. Once untouchable within the party's progressive wing, Miliband's influence could face new scrutiny as more centrist figures, including Starmer himself, weigh the electoral consequences of sticking too rigidly to pre-recession climate pledges. The political calculus is clear. With an election approaching, every policy position will be weaponized. Starmer must now choose whether to double down on his original Green pledges, risk internal revolt by sidelining Miliband, or take Blair's advice and pivot, potentially signaling to voters that Labour is capable of both boldness and realism.